Well, would you help me welcome our esteemed guest, Frank Ferrante. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you. Hi. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming, and thank you for inviting me. And you have no idea of how wild this is for me to be here in a church near an altar, and it's not what I thought was going to happen in my life. I did everything I could to avoid churches because I had a rather harsh and unpleasant experience as a child in a Catholic parochial school. So after I left that, the last place I wanted to be near was a church. And through my life, what I realized that I did was, now I realize what I did is I shut out a lot of sunshine and sunlight from my life. But the funny thing is, the irony is that I have a long history of drug and alcohol abuse and living in the dark side. And then I got sober, and what am I doing? I'm in church basements all the time, and I did that for a long time, and now I'm like standing. This is so bizarre. Anyway, I'm blown away. Okay, so. One of the things I wanted to talk about is forgiveness, and that's really a major part of my journey right now. And usually, people think of forgiveness as like I'm sorry, or also people get invested in how the other person is going to react, and what I discovered is in order to forgive myself, I have to forgive you first. And one experience that I had was, as I said, I had this like really harsh experience with Catholic school, and as a result, I nurtured a resentment, and that resentment enabled me to feel superior and gave me the illusion of power. Because resentment feels better than pain, right? So it trumps it. And so I was living in Santa Monica at the time, and I was with a woman who had absolutely no experience with Catholicism whatsoever, and grew up in a place called Needles, California. And I thought, what, did they run out of names? Because there's nothing inviting about that name. And so it was a rather austere spiritual orientation. And so there was a really lovely place near where we were living, and St. Monica's Church, and it's a cathedral, it's beautiful. So we go in, she wanted to know about it. So we go in, and I went in there like I came to scoff kind of thing. And because all my memories were rather unpleasant, but there was a mass going on. So I'm explaining to her what's going on, the symbols, the stained glass windows. And if you're from Needles, that's like all of a sudden, it's like an assault on the senses. And she was in. She was going to join the club. Like she was a convert. And I said, oh man. So one day, she comes home and says, I decided I want to be a Catholic. I thought, oh, God, okay. So she goes to see this guy, the Monsignor, which for those of you not familiar with Catholicism is like middle management. So she goes to see this guy and tells him briefly about my unpleasant association with Catholicism, and they both decide that I should come into his office for a reconciliation. Right, so, a guy will do anything to keep the peace at home, right? So okay, but so I said, I'll go, but I had immediately developed an agenda. In New York City, when you get arrested and you go to court, the judge has something called a yellow sheet. A yellow sheet are a list of your priors. So I was going to go see this guy, and I had a yellow sheet for them. And so anyway, they made an appointment. I mean, this is like I had nothing to do with it. This was all done for me, or to me, anyway, depending on how you want to look at it. So I go to this guy's office, and I'm prepared for an attack. I have like 35, 40 years of resentments that were simmering that now have a place to actually, I can go to the source and unleash my venom. And which of course was righteous, So I go to the office, and it was, because it was a well-to-do diocese, it's like a real typical well-to-do Catholic office. Heavy oak furniture, heavy red velvet curtains, the red velvet upholstery. The crucifix was like life-size. You couldn't steal anything from this guy's office because it was too heavy to lift. Because I thought about stealing something, but I couldn't lift anything. So it was almost like a boxing match. So the Monsignor's sitting in one corner, and it just happened that way. I'm sitting in this, I sink into this, heavy velvet oak chair, and I'm ready. So he says, I understand you have some issues with the Catholic Church. I said, issues? I said, magazines have issues. I said, I got something for you. And I took a breath, right? I took a breath, and I was like, I loaded my gun, and I was ready to fire. And he said, when was the last time you went to confession? And it stunned me, right? And I said, well, I don't remember, Father. Father? Did you just say Father? Like what? And he says, well, how about now? And I'm starting to feel like defeated, because I came in here to attack, but now, because when they get you when you're little, right? They got you, and somehow that he figured out a way, in this nasty way, to unlock that thing, right? So I'm saying, I don't remember, Father. Well, how about now? And I automatically, it was like a Shirley MacLaine out-of-body experience, right? I start saying, well, bless me, Father, if I have sinned. I haven't been to confession in a long time. Tell me your sins. And I feel like, who is this? Shut up. Attack, attack, attack. You're losing, man. So I tried to hold on whatever shred of arrogant dignity I could. And I said, well, Father, I'm thinking, Father, I said, I've done a lot of things that I'm not proud of, and I've done a lot of things that I'm ashamed of. I said, but what I regret the most is that I hurt people. I said, sometimes it was inadvertent, sometimes it was because I was stoned, sometimes it was deliberate, but in the end, the result was the same. I hurt people, and for that, I hold a true remorse. And there was a pregnant pause in the room, and he looks at me and he says, my son, on behalf of the Catholic Church, I apologize for all the wrongs done to you. And then he said, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, I absolve you of all your sins. And now, my son, I leave you to the daunting task of forgiving yourself. So I stepped out into the bright, sunny day of Santa Monica, and one would think that at the end of that story there would be like a celebration of release and I was liberated. Instead, what really happened, I was in the sun. There's a great lyric in a U2 song that the sun was so bright it left no shadows, that all you could see were the scars. And the scar is something from the past, a reminder, but it's healed, right? But I didn't know who I was, because forgiveness is not just saying, I'm sorry, I accept, and that goes. I held that resentment for so long that it had become part of my identity. So if I would meet you in a bar with, we had a drink or two, or 5 or 6 or 7, in my case, and we'd be talking, within a few minutes, I would enroll you in my army my crusade against the Catholic Church, right? It was part of how I saw myself, part of of a filter through which I looked at the world. So I wasn't I was lost for a moment because there was a healing, but I didn't know who I was. It felt like something was missing, and it was. I had released a spiritual tumor out of me, and there was this felt like this emptiness that I had to re-identify myself, because I no longer had that language. I could no longer had justifiable access to the language that I had been using to get through and justify my bad behaviors through my resentments. And so I was lost. I imagined that, when I saw one sort of thing on Animal Planet, and this animal shed its skin, and there's that interval where there's incredible discomfort and he's incredibly vulnerable, and I felt like that. Well, I went home and contemplated all this and decided I was going to go back to New York, the scene of the crime, where all these people were, and I had this really kind of like Broadway musical, Broadway musical, thing I was going to do. It's like this like cleansing. And so I go to New York and I borrow my brother's car and I drive to, and I remember I went to this place every day for 7 years. The church, the school, the church, the convent, like all these. And one of the reasons that they were so harsh is because it was an Italian neighborhood and all the nuns were Irish, And I still remember to this day, like Francis Higgins, John Justin, the Harrison twins, they never got hit. The Ferrantes, the Caratellis, and Delicatos got whipped. Anyway, so, there was this ritual that I had, concocted in my head. I was going to go there and, just like finalize the whole thing. So I get my brother's car and I drive to this intersection of Melrose and Wilson Avenue is actually where it was in Brooklyn. For those of you, nobody's going to know where that is, but I got out of the car and I was disoriented. There was nothing familiar, and I knew I was in the right place, but nothing looked right. Well, what happened was the church was gone. They had leveled it and built an apartment complex there. The convent was gone. They built, that was part of the apartment complex. The school, which was a small little Stalin-esque concrete structure, right, was like now a storage facility. The only remaining thing was a stone that said the cornerstone of when the building was built, which was in 1956, which is when I actually went there. And it occurred to me that I was probably the only person, like within thousands of miles, that knew this place even existed. That everybody who had ever beaten me or threatened me or terrorized me or whatever had been dead a long time. But in my mind, I had kept all of those people on life support and visited them regularly to make sure everything was working properly so that I can maintain this poison that ran through my veins. And so, the ritual was done for me. And I realized that so much of my life was like that. So much of my life was like it was my mind. There's a lot of real estate taken up in my mind by illusion, And really, after 50 years, who can really say if you're accurate about your memory? Really, I'm not even sure if I'm right about what they did. I know they did some bad stuff, but the details are kind of foggy after like 25 years of heroin, cocaine, and alcohol. It's like, I might be wrong. I might be wrong about my memory. And I realized I did a lot of my life that way. There was one time, I was in my 30s. I was a carpenter, and so I'm working on this construction job. I was your really stereotypical Italian construction worker. Just really macho, but just really vulnerable inside, but always acting like prepared for an attack. And so I had this job, and the guys I worked with were just like me, And so, the kind of guys that say, hey, I worked all week. I deserve to put all this stuff in my nose and in my face because I worked hard. If you had my wife, you would do this. If you had my job, blah blah blah. Really, really high vibrational thinking, So, the kind of guy you want to bring home to mom, So I remember I had this Volvo. Believe it or not, it was a 1949 Volvo with like 370 million miles on it. And this guy sold it to me like for 35 cents in a bottle of vodka, and it required attention, So there was something going on. So at lunchtime at the job, I go down to the car to fix, so I had the hood up, and there were parts of the car that looked like an old sardine can. I mean, it's just like ratty, and this is like, it was an old car. As I closed the hood of the car, a piece of metal nipped my knuckle and cut it. It was, a pretty, industrial manly cut, it's on the knuckle. And what I should have done was go to the hospital. But because I'm like a high-minded, macho Italian carpenter, I go back to the construction site and go to the painter, get a rag, and wrap my hand and go back to work, because you don't want to seem like a punk. Irrespective of how stupid you look, but you don't want to be a punk. So I wrapped up my hand and I started working. And it never healed because it was on the knuckle, so it never really got a chance to heal. And I did this on a daily basis until after 3 weeks, it started to really, really, really hurt. But I was going to work anyway. But one night, it was like 3 or so weeks later, I woke up at like 4 o'clock in the morning in incredible pain. Everybody was sleeping. I got in my car and drove to the ER. And there wasn't fortunately there wasn't anybody there. So I go in, they brought me right in. I sit on the gurney, sit on the bed, and I'm, harsh fluorescent lights, like emergency rooms are not built for comfort. It's urgency, right? So I'm sitting there and the bright lights and people milling around. So a nurse comes over and she takes my hand. By the way, I had created this imaginary bubble because it was in pain all the time, but she comes into my space. And she opens the bandage, she takes the bandage, unwraps it, and she looks at the wound, and then she glances up at the moron that brought it in. And then she takes my hand and, without saying a word, grabs my wrist, pulls me over to the sink. And as we're going to the sink, I start to panic. Oh my God, we're going to the sink. She's going to wash it. She's going to wash, she's going to touch it. Oh my God. And I'm freaking out. So she puts it under the sink, and I'm in shock that I can't even respond. And then she takes the betadine, this brown stuff, and I'm like totally freaked out. Walk back to the bed, and then she gets the tray of bandages and stuff, and she gets this bandage. I have never seen anything so white in my life. It was so beautiful. She put some ointment on and some other stuff, and she wrapped it in this bandage. It was like a Gucci bandage. It was a styling wound, and she wrapped it up, and she gave me an antibiotic or something, and she wrapped it up. I left home. 4 days later, it was fine. It was healed. And that is exactly how I handled all the hurts in my life. Exactly. I just postponed the inevitable. I postponed what it would take to do the healing. That brief interval of discomfort, to go through, the 3 days in the tomb, to go through that, and then to be, to come back into the sunshine of the Spirit. But I was too afraid to do that. And that moment, that really reflected the way I handled my emotional life. 4 days later, I was healed. And now, the thing about that is I can look at, what a drag, you suffered, blah, 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 and you really evoke some self-pity, which, by the way, is kind of comfortable once in a while. But what I did was, I cheated my boss because I had one hand. I could barely use this hand, so I wasn't an effective worker. I wasn't being a good citizen. I wasn't being a good friend because my boss was also my friend. So in a sense, in some way, you could look at it as stealing. And I look at, so getting back to the forgiveness thing is that if I don't forgive you, I can't forgive myself. I don't believe in that thing about if you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody. I don't believe that to be true. And I think that forgiveness often gets a bad rap, like turning the other cheek. It's really a heart opening. It enables me to really be clear about what I'm doing, and also to start that process of forgiving myself and letting myself off the hook. And I think that it's part of taking care of yourself. I mean, I don't think that, people often think that they have to do or get something to generate a transformation, the hole in the soul. I don't believe there's a hole in the soul, but people believe that, and society doesn't help this, but it's really always about reaching for an external solution for an internal conflict. And it's an inside job. And I don't think that all these processes of forgiveness and acting in kindness enables me to reveal who I am. I think that's what it's about. It's not about infusing something and bringing something in. And it's really about revealing who I am. For example, one of the things they say, money changes people. Money doesn't change people. It reveals people. It reveals people. And the journey within is a journey of revealing who we really are. And so I think that's all part of taking care of yourself. It's not just about, that falls into the transformational thing. Most people look at me as a guy who was really big and lost weight. I got to stop doing this. It's hard being Italian and anyway, so, but it's part of self-care. Forgiveness is part of self-nurturing. It's not just, people know me as the guy that, lost a lot of weight, but that was only a small component of it. And it's about taking care of yourself. Taking care of yourself is a global thing. I think it's about your spirit as well as your body. And your body is definitely an important component in getting internal clarity. It's not enough, because you could eat a bale of organic baby spinach a month. It doesn't mean you're going to be an ascendant master. There's other stuff you got to do besides go to Whole Foods. All right. So, and I think that all of this stuff is taking care of yourself. I mean, to me, taking care of yourself is the new patriotism. Because if we don't, in 10 years, people are going to be fighting for dialysis machines. So, really, taking care of yourself is the new patriotism. You don't like the government. You don't like Obamacare. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself, because, I mean, if you take care of yourself, it's amazing how few trips you got to make to CVS or your doctor. It's amazing. So I think my time here is up. I don't want to be final about it. My time isn't up. But I want to thank all of you for allowing me to be here and for being so gracious and so welcoming and so loving. I absolutely adore Kansas City. If you had a body of water and a longer summer, I'd consider living here. So, thank you.